Warriors in Terminator plate led the way, their thick armor bearing the brunt of punishing demonic attacks. Purgation squads followed close behind, their massed heavy weapons fire blowing away the densest knots of demons and creating space for the Brotherhood to push into. But for all the Grey Knight's grim determination, peerless equipment, and unquenchable resolve, their foes fought hard. Brothers were mutated beyond recognition by warping flames, or dragged down by cavorting horrors that bit and tore at the minute weak points in the Space Marine's armor. The Grey Knights cut a red path through the labyrinthine streets, but despite their ferocity, they found themselves repeatedly arriving in the very same plaza in which they had started, no matter which route they took. Only the power of Magnus himself could deceive the Grey Knights in such a way. Vital time had been lost, knowing that this trickery had to be undone. Stern rallied his librarians to him. They warned that the power required to break the sorcery was incredibly dangerous, and would only attract more foes, but Stern knew they had no choice. As librarians formed a loose circle and began the ritual, they felt the tides of the warp shift in strange, unexpected ways. Reality at the center of the circle shattered, and a shimmering portal appeared, its light almost blinding them. Kaldor Drago strode out of it, raising the Titan sword aloft. His lips moved rapidly, the words impossible to hear over the sounds of battle, but their effects impossible not to see. All around the Grey Knights, Magnus's spells lifted, and the true face of the plaza was revealed. Proud columns were in fact piles of broken rubble. Pristine mosaics were shattered or defiled. Breathtaking frescoes were roughly daubed over with unholy symbols and blasphemous images. The Adeptus Astartes forges heroes aplenty during untold campaigns of bloodshed and glory, stemming the tide of darkness as the Imperium stagnates and decays. The Angels of Death sacrifice life, limb, and even their immortal souls to defend humanity from the clutches of chaos. Yet while some legends exist only in verse and mural, some are near mythic in stature, materializing during the direst of hours of the Imperium's need. For today, we shall elucidate a paladin of the Void, whose toil fighting the foes of the Imperium within the very heart of the Warp is regaled to many as little more than a fable, rather than a flesh and blood Astartes. The Supreme Grand Master of the Grey Knights chapter, Kaldor Drago. To speak the deeds of the elusive 666th chapter of the Adeptus Astartes is a difficult task by its very nature, their enigmatic deeds shrouded in secrecy by the highest of Imperial authorities, leaving little scraps of records to decipher. Yet what little is known of the champion of the Grey Knights can be gleaned from his initial service to the chapter's third brotherhood, the Wardmakers. Upon the planet Akralem, within the Vitor sector of space, the young Astartes faced an ancient foe of his creed, the fallen word-bearer, Makar the Reborn. Once known by his kinsman as Malok Kafo, had fought during the era of the Horus Heresy, his actions bleeding the Ultramarines Legion during the betrayal of Calth, cementing his reputation as among the most depraved heretics. His orbital fleet destroyed, and efforts to deploy a virus bomb upon Calth thwarted by the 13th Legion hero, Remus Ventanus. Though his form would be banished, being cast into a warp rift of his own creation, the ruinous powers granted their disciple a boon for his service. His slaughter of millions of Calth citizens, thousands of Ultramarines, and even his own men, rewarded with his ascension into the form of a demon entity by merging with a being known as Makar. Now known as Makar the Thriceborn, this malevolent creature stalked the stars, his invasion of the Vidar section during 799.M41 intended as a worthy sacrifice to his ruinous benefactors. Confronted by the Flesh Terrors, Astral Knights, and 9 Imperial Guard regiments, alone, such a potent force could not best an armada, led by such a vindictive thrall of chaos. Reinforced by the Third Brotherhood, the doomed campaign turned to the Imperium's favor, Drago's company striking at Makar's Warp Fortress to end the campaign with its overlord's destruction. Facing the Ascended Demon Prince in single combat, the young Kaldor Drago cast the fell entity into the roiling tides of the Warp. The last actions of the Dark Apostle before his banishment, casting a hex upon Drago as it stated,
"Victory is yours this day, mortal, but know that if you ever set talk of damnation for 10 millennia.
Keenly aware of Knight Kaldor's potential, the hierarchy of the chapter promoted Drago to the rank of Justicar. His continued efforts for 200 years of duty, earning him plaudits comparable to the founding members of his order, the Titans. Deployed to the world of Cornavin during 901.M41, Drago faced the most powerful foe he would likely ever face, the Demon Primarch of the 14th Legion, Mortarion. Under the command of the Grey Knight's 47th Supreme Grand Master, Linus Garonitan, this exemplar of the 666th had been prophesied to face the Pawn of Nurgle and herald the arrival of a warrior who had cast the Pale King from the mortal realm. Facing the Prince of Decay in battle, Linus Garonitan proved no match against an ascended Demon Primarch, yet his fall would be avenged by his successor. Uttering the Emperor's true chosen name for Mortarion, rather than his title inherited from the world of Barbarous, Kaldor Drago wrenched the Deathlord's heart from his chest and carved the name of Linus Garonitan upon its fetid surface. Proclaimed the 48th Supreme Grand Master of the Grey Knights following the banishment of the Pale King into the Warp, Kaldor Drago led his chapter with distinction for almost a century. Entrusted with the mastercrafted relic of the chapter with his ascension, the Titan Sword, the blade of many names such as Life Drinker, Foebane, and Mind's Edge, was said to be forged by the Emperor's own hands during the Wars of Unification. First wielded in service to the Grey Knights by their primogenitor, Janus, such a potent weapon required routine psychic attunement with its wielder to hone its immense power. Yet the Grey Knights alone do not possess the prestigious title of Supreme Grand Master, and soon another revered bearer of such a title would fight at their side. Upon the death world of Pythos, hidden deep beneath its surface, a resource of immense import lay dormant which the Pawns of Chaos vied to claim. Protected by the Grey Knights since among their earliest recorded history of the 33rd millennium, such was the artifact's power that one of its founding titans, Epimetheus, would remain in stasis for millennia in order to protect it from the Imperium's enemies. A staging ground used during the Horus Heresy to spill forth demonic entities, the Damnation Cache portal to the Warp allowed for a direct route between dimensions which threatened to overrun the Pandarax system should it be left unguarded. Besieged by the War Master of Chaos Undivided, Abaddon the Despoiler during 959.M41, who had known of its location due to his prior service as a son of Horus. A fleet of half a dozen battleships with firepower enough to engulf the planet in flames began to make planetfall. Deploying Dreadclaw drop pod assaults upon the hive port of Attica, hundreds of Black Legion Astartes, Cornate Berserkers, and demonic Forge Fiends laid waste to the populace. Defended by mortal soldiery of the 183rd Katakan Jungle Fighters under the command of their grizzled veteran and de facto planetary governor, Colonel Deathstrike, no matter the resourcefulness of such mortal warriors, hope for Pythos could not be achieved without reinforcement. Claiming the Damnation Cache and unsealing its wards after a month of battle, demons overran Pythos as outbound transmissions called for aid from the nearby Demetor sector. Received by Lord Admiral Orson Kranzwar aboard his flagship Revenge, the veteran who had faced the piratical raiders of the Red Corsairs knew his own respectable experience to be insufficient in combating the War Master of Chaos's forces. Establishing a base of operations upon the world of Gaia at the edge of the Pandorax system, regardless of the risk, Lord Admiral Kranzwar held the nearby Adamantium Field asteroid belt until reinforcements joined the fray. Draining Abaddon's armada of firepower, the War Master's fleet would be reinforced by Huron Blackheart's warband. Their involvement in great slaughter and plunder prize enough for their allegiance. Driven from the Adamantium Fields back to Gaia, Lord Admiral Kranzwar made ready his armada for one glorious final battle. Abaddon's lieutenant, the fallen White Consul, Malgar Irongrasp, breaking through the fleet's lines. Aiming to destroy the Revenge with a massive asteroid towed by the Red Corsair slaughterclass cruiser, the Might of Huron, Kranzwar readied himself to join the Emperor's side in death. The end of his duty to the Master of Mankind forestalled with the arrival of the Dark Angel's mobile fortress monastery, the Rock. The gigantic vessel deployed the full might of the Lion's Sons against the traitors. Driving back the traitor armada as the Dark Angel's battle barge, Unrelenting Fury, distracted fire from being sustained to the Revenge. Deathwing Terminators teleported onto the covens of Chaos Sorcerers in a deployment of such scale rarely seen per century. Destroying the asteroid targeting the Revenge, the crew of the flagship marveled at the arrival of an even more mysterious band of Astartes, the Grey Knights, as squads of silver-clad space marines materialized within the ship's hull to purge the wicked. Joining forces, the 1st and 666th chapters brought the fight to Pandarax, ending the reign of the Might of Huron before turning their attentions to deploy onto the surface of Pythos. Trapping Abaddon, as Dark Angels and Grey Knights Voidcraft blockaded the planet, the Black Legion reeled as Supreme Grand Masters Azrael and Kaldor Drago sundered hordes of traitor filth. Meeting with Colonel Deathstrike, Azrael assumed command of the counteroffensive, the assembled commanders discussing their objectives until a rift began to form between the Astartes chapters. While Azrael asserted their priority was to defend the beleaguered citizenry of the planet, Drago refuted that until the portal to the Immaterium was closed, their efforts would be a waste of time and lives. Assimilating the jungle fighters into the fold, despite the protestations of Azrael, the Imperial forces resolved to make ready to secure the Damnation Cache to ensure a swift conclusion to the war. Slaying over 100,000 demons as they secured Achaia, Imperial forces focused their attentions to the underground tunnels leading to the portal, the bitter defenders of Chaos Space Marines and demonic entities proving difficult to root out. Aided by Warhound Titans and Deathstrike Vortex missile platforms when space allowed, the Space Marines pushed forward, claiming territories yard by yard as the clandestine efforts of ancient Epimetheus eroded the traitors' efforts from behind enemy lines. Drawing close to the Damnation Cache's location, a fresh flotilla of the Red Corsairs arrived in orbit, breaking through Imperial lines and evacuating Abaddon's forces. Seizing the Damnation Cache with Kaldor Drago at their spear tip, the Grey Knights sealed the portal to the Immaterium, yet could find no trace of their resurgent founding titan of legend. The aftermath leaving several unclosed minor warp rifts upon the surface of Pythos. Kaldor Drago ordered a portion of his chapter to remain, as they continued to cleanse the Death World of the remaining outposts of Chaos. The battle had been costly, and relations between the Dark Angels and Grey Knights had been strained. The Supreme Grand Masters coming to blows with reports that Epimetheus had not been located, leading Drago to surmise the former Dark Angel may have been taken into custody by his uncompromising descendants. The fate of Epimetheus too terrible to comprehend. Though Abaddon fled the field, the War Master delighted in the suffering of his captured Titan, offering his progenoid glands to the spider, Fabius Bile, as his torment served as a symbol of the Grey Knights' failure to save their revered primogenitor. Now leading his chapter as its wisest and most steadfast champion. 200 years to the day of banishing Makar, Kaldor Drago received a distress call from the world upon which he had banished the entity. Once more beset by demonic invasion, the world of Akralem cried out for salvation, a call which Kaldor would not ignore, knowing that the Fryspawn was undoubtedly responsible. Unwilling to allow his kinsman to interfere with his own burden, Drago traveled to Akralem alone to prevent calamity, knowing the promise of the curse to his person to still be intact. Purging the castle of Gorseth of chaos filth, Drago redeployed to assist the Cadian 912th retreat of the Trabian Valley as he fought for 2 days of tireless battle. After 2 weeks of slaughter, Kaldor Drago finally faced his nemesis within the mountainous shadow peak of Akralem, facing it once more in single combat as the Cadians held the demonic invasion, spewing from the peak's warp rift at bay. Bathing the demon in Psyflame as his nemesis' Foresword cut chunks from its flesh, Makar's countering strike broke the Titan Sword in twain as it bellowed boasts of its victory. Summoning all reserves of strength still within him, Kaldor Drago infused his broken blade with psychic energy, burying its jagged tip into the heart of the Demon Prince and sealing the portal it had summoned. Dragging Kaldor into the rift before its closing, the Supreme Grand Master of the Grey Knights began his long vigil within the Immaterium, forever tethered to the realm of chaos as its prisoner. Such a pious servant of the Emperor would not go gently into endless night. His gleaming silver plate of his Terminator armor and immense storm shield protecting his form from the claws and jagged blades of his fell enemies, the broken edge of the Titan Sword cut swathes through the armies of the damned. Enduring the mental strain of existing within the depths of the Immaterium, which would cause even veteran Astartes to succumb to madness, no enticement nor trickery of the Chaos Gods could manipulate this singularly pure warrior. wandering the plains of the Immaterium, adding to the death tally of his revered, yet sundered Nemesis Foresword. Drago overcame all champions of the Four who barred his path, no matter their status nor prowess. Slaying the Bloodthirster, Karvoth, within the Bloodfalls of Khorne, Drago purified its battle axe with the Emperor's holy Psyflame, using its molten remains to reforge the broken edge of the Titan Sword. Burning swathes of the jungles of the Gardens of Nurgle with Warpflame, and rejecting the boons of the Lord of Change, Makarkan, within Tzeentch's inevitable city, Drago buried the greater demon beneath the foundations of the city, cast down by his hands. Ending the reign of the 6 demonette handmaidens of Slaanesh within the Whispering Meadows, their promises of riches and power could not entice the champion of the Grey, as he scattered their dismembered remains across the Alabaster grasslands of the Prince of Pleasure's domains. Each of the champions of the Four, dispatched to turn his cause to their master, had failed, the Pantheon of Chaos ordering their minions to no longer harry his path, for fear of the interloper's wrath. Now immune from the subterfuge of the Four, Kaldor Drago, regardless of his incorruptibility, could not facilitate meaningful change within the territories of Chaos. For every bastion sundered or demon slain, their immutable forms merely regrew and resurged, the champion of order unable to achieve notable victories within the heart of anarchic disorder. Knowing his might to be best suited for combat within the material realm, Drago began to investigate means to return to real space, even if only sparsely due to the curse of Makar. First encountering a means to escape the warp, following the trail of Nakari. With its summoning by the prophet of Justero, the Supreme Grand Master used his limited time to return to his chapter. Convening with strangers unfamiliar to his prior service, the Grey Knights surmised that Kaldor now existed within a malleable state of time. Yet not a soul among the 666th chapter could not recognize the legend in their midst. Embracing their champion with warm regard before standing by his side as they deployed upon Justero, the Grey Knights' hearts swelled with pride as they banished the demonic invaders from the planet. Their victory proving hollow as the receding warp rift claimed its due. The Immaterium snatched Kaldor Drago from his brethren, leaving little more than a memory of his staunch defiance, recording the phenomena within their archives as a spectacle for any so fortunate to witness. The Grey Knights, regardless of their brief reunion, now knew that their Supreme Grand Master still fought within the depths of hell itself. Inspired by their Paragon's myriad resurgences during the chapter's most perilous campaigns, the Sons of Titan took solace, knowing that for each warzone Drago was sighted, victory was all but assured. Never complaining at his circumstance, nor buckling from his burden, Kaldor Drago has endured as a symbol of the Imperium's resolve and righteous duty to combat the Imperium's enemies, eternal. With the birth of the Great Rift, sightings of the Silver Paladin have increased in frequency, bearing credence to the proposition that humanity's current era marks its most critical struggle for survival. The most insightful Grey Knights, believing the rend of the Cicatrix Maledictum to have weakened the tether between Drago's bond to the Immaterium. Despite its burgeoning of the domains of chaos, it is also safe to surmise that with such an expanse, more opportunities to breach the veil have presented themselves. His presence within the material realm also increased with such a drastic change to the galaxy's dimensions. Though the Great Rift has become a curse for many a stalwart defender of humanity, the event has only increased Drago's power. The prognosticators of the chapter citing his ties of hatred to the Lord of Decay to also be cause for his resurgence. Prior to the Demon Primarch's Plague Wars, a vicious blow was struck to its pride. The crew of the Grey Knight strike cruiser, Baleful Edict, tasked with eradicating a plague which claimed swathes of the galaxy to miasma and disease, the Bloom. Under command of Inquisitor Kartha Vakir, the Sons of Titan targeted the champions of Nurgle, spreading its infection. Culling the so-called Reapers with Blade and Bolter, with the intervention of Death Guard traitor Marines to the campaign, the provenance of their efforts to summon the Morbus entity became clear. Seeking to allow Mortarion to return to the Imperium's domains to harvest untold innocent souls for his fell patron, Kaldor Drago once more returned to his chapter in their hour of need. Invading the Garden of Nurgle with aid from 8 battle brothers of the chapter, Inquisitor Vakir sacrificed her soul to the Plague God in order to locate the root cause of the Bloom. Instilled with hatred for the shame he had endured, Mortarion gladly faced the Grey Knights and their paragon in battle. the gifts of Nurgle insufficient in defending the Pale King from Drago's Titan Sword. Severing the roots of the bloom, following Mortarion's cowardly retreat from battle, Khaldor Drago, now supported by a retinue of among the finest of his creed, continued his vigil within the domains of chaos until the Imperium's hour of need. Once more aiding the Dark Angels chapter in combating the forces of chaos with the dawn of the 42nd millennium, alongside their 5th company, the Keepers of the Unseen Ritual, the Grey Knights assaulted the planet of the sorcerers, Sortiarius. Its breach of the material realm following the siege of Fenris, the Demon Primarch, Magnus the Red, sought to gain a foothold within the territories of the Imperium in order to construct a psychic beacon to rally his warp-spawned ilk to replenish his beleaguered armies. Led by the Grey Knights' Third Brotherhood, Captain Arvan Stern, and the Dark Angels captain, Lazarus, the Astartes rallied at the Prospero system to face the pawns of the Crimson King. Assaulting the ritual site with ground assaults due to its psychic barriers preventing orbital barrage, while the Grey Knights beset the summoning grounds, the Dark Angels laid siege to the Temple of Sortiarius. The sorceries of the Thousand Suns, stalling the Grey Knights' attack. During their peril, Khaldor Drago materialized to bolster their charge, petitioning aid from Dark Angels librarian Barakiel as they began to gain ground. Sacrificing their lives to create a warp tunnel to swiftly reach the Grey Knights' position, the Dark Angels librarians ensured the success of the assault of the ritual site, as Stern ordered his men to create a psychic beacon of their own. Ordering the strike cruiser, Purging Sword, to fire upon the beacon's position, several Grey Knights and Dark Angels sacrificed their lives in the blast to ensure Magnus's plot was thwarted. Dispatching the bearer of the Sword of Antwyr, Garen Crow, to rescue his brethren who could not be withdrawn from the fray. With the limited time remaining to him, Khaldor Drago convened a council with the Grand Masters of the chapter, advising his brethren to consider opening the Terminus Decree locked deep within the chapter's vaults of Titan. It is the belief of Khaldor Drago that the end times for humanity draw near. Though none know what is contained within the ancient housing containing the decree, it is to be opened only when all hope for humanity's survival is lost, and once released, may herald the last contingency of the Emperor to prevent the species' extinction. For while Khaldor Drago stems the tide of darkness, one foe at a time, trillions of souls are beset by the thralls of chaos, and no man, no matter his strength, can save the innocent alone. The 10-man squad of Deathwing Knights flanked the approach to the roar of vengeance, maces held high to form a processional archway which their lord and master could board the Thunderhawk. As he neared the waiting craft, Azrael noticed the heads of some of his honor guard twitch, turning slightly to look back behind him. Usually, this sort of infraction would result in a stern rebuke at the very least, a writ of penitence at worst, but Azrael would have expected only a single battle brother to show such indiscipline. This was a whole squad, of Deathwing Knights no less. Curious as to what had distracted such immaculately disciplined and well-drilled Space Marines, Azrael turned around to look, just in time to catch a silvered fist in his face. The blow was controlled, not hard enough to render him unconscious or break any bones, but with enough force to knock him brusquely to his backside. In a blur, his assailant was on top of him, gripping the collar of his cloak and snarling.
What did you do with him, you bastard?
Drago yelled, spittle trailing from his lips and teeth.
Is he up there in those dungeons of yours, along with all those others you've collected down the centuries? What do you want with them? What is it you do to them?
The Deathwing Honor Guard surrounded the pair of Supreme Grand Masters, their weapons primed and all aimed at Drago's head. Azrael gestured for them to lower their arms.
I don't know what you're talking about,
Azrael said, trying to remove the Grey Knight's hand from upon him. Drago slammed the Dark Angel against the ground again.
Liar! You've taken him. I know you have. Were you in league with Abaddon all along? Did he deliver him to you in exchange for his escape?
The Deathwing's guns rose again. This time, Azrael did not order them dropped. Are you accusing me of heresy, Grey Knight? It was as much a warning as an accusation. Drago paused, fully aware of the implications of responding in the affirmative. He released his grip on Azrael and stood up.
You figured out who he was and what he was, and you had to have him to yourself. Pray I never obtain proof as the fury of the entire Grey Knights chapter will make what you face here on Pyphos look like a training exercise. This has been a tale of the Great Imperium of Man by the Remembrancer. Drago's vigil within the heart of darkness is nothing short of a feat of superhuman resolve. His mental and physical fortitude tested beyond the limits of even transhuman souls. It is often said that those with the strongest wills must shoulder the heaviest of burdens. For power, whatever its providence, must benefit the weak for it to be earned. Whatever your own strength, use it wisely, for while examples such as Kaldor's are inspiring, one must not volunteer to undertake a weight which cannot be carried. To know your own limits is a test of humility, yet does not preclude you from accepting responsibilities in the future which may now seem insurmountable. Yet gradual improvement accrues with interest, for should you studiously hone your capabilities with patience and discipline, you shall transcend even your own ambition.